Most of you have seen the excellent video released this week by TIK Battlestorm Stalingrad, the first of a very promising series. I'd really like it to succeed and to become the ultimate Stalingrad documentary so far. That's why I decided to help with whatever I can on this subject and to release this small add-on video to provide some extra data regarding the initial balance of forces at the very beginning of the fighting in July 1942. In a future video, we can go deeper into detail regarding the German-Soviet command and control structure in this period, but for the moment, let's focus on strand returns only, since this particular aspect can usefully complete TIK's own release. First, let's review the different dates used at the beginning of the battle for Stalingrad, depending on the chosen point of view. According to archival evidence, the very first contact between German Sixth Army's forward units and those of the Soviet Stalingrad Front dates from the evening of July 16, 1942. The usual date in official history for the beginning of the battle is July 17. On July 23rd, the first strategically important engagement developed in the Don River Bend, 100 kilometers from the city. Exactly 1 month after, on August 23rd, the first German troops reached the Volga north of Stalingrad, which was also subjected to the first large-scale bombing. Fighting in the city itself began on September 13. Now let's see what units took part in the first significant fighting in July. And incidentally, let's have a look at the initial balance of forces between Sixth Army and the Stalingrad Front. As of July 23, 1942, the German Sixth Army was about 380,000 strong. Archival data confirm that it actually over 100,000 more than the usually given figure of 270,000. Not only Western, but Russian history as well had long underestimated it. 14th Panzer Corps has 217 tanks, 24th Panzer Division 92, so that a good 300 of them were at Paulus's disposal at the beginning. And since we're still in July, this doesn't include the armored vehicles of 4th Panzer Army, which was to join the battlefield in a few weeks. 6th Army's ground troops were supported by Luftwaffe 4 with about 1,200 aircraft. As shown in 6th Army's report for July 20, although they were not full strength, the divisions were generally fit for fighting. However, we can also note that from the very beginning 6th Army faced logistical issues, as pointed out by TIK as well, and it experienced a lack of supplies as shown in the Oberquartermaster's report for July 20. So that's it for the German. Now let's look at the Soviet order of battle. The Soviet Stalingrad Front was created on July 12, 1942, out of the structure and troops of the Southwestern Front, to which were added 3 newly arriving ex-reserve armies, 62nd, 63rd and 64th, supported by 8th Air Army. On July 20, the Stalingrad Front's troops numbered about 350,000 men. The troops of the Stalingrad Front that actually could take part in the first significant engagement on 23rd of July were less than 200,000 strong. The Stalingrad Front was still in complete recomposition. Most of its units were arriving piecemeal on the battlefield for about 15 days. So at the beginning of the engagement in the Downriver Band, the Stalingrad Front was 350,000 strong on paper only. By slowing down the German advance in the Downriver Band and preventing German forces from crossing the Downriver, the troops of the three ex-reserve armies gave the Soviet command enough time to complete the restructuration of the front, and only by the beginning of August did the Stalingrad Front consist in its actual 350,000 troops. Whereas the 21st, 51st and 57th armies were exhausted and severely depleted after weeks of fighting, not even speaking of 28th and 38th armies, of which only the structure remained to serve as a basis for the creation of 1st and 4th tank armies. The three new arriving armies were at a high level of completion. Let's have a closer look at this army's composition, because this particular part was lacking in TIK's video. So what about these three new armies? The 62nd, 63rd and 64th. Their divisions were close to their authorized nominal strength of 12,807 men. For comparison, in the other armies, 300th and 304th divisions averaged only 1,000 men each. The number of rifles and submachine guns was also close to the norm. Moreover, submachine guns were in abundance. It was only worse with machine guns. Heavy machine guns were about 3/4 of the norm, and light machine guns were 2/3. But the number of mortars in all divisions of the two ex-reserve armies even exceeded the nominal number of weapons of this type. Now let's have a look at the figures for another army, the 21st. This one was already fighting for a long time. The Soviet Stalingrad Front had about 230 tanks in various subunits, to which were soon added those of the Reserve Tank Corps, which became part of the newly created 1st and 4th Tank Armies, respectively 390 and 180 tanks, for a grand total of about 800 tanks. So, as compared to German figures, there was no clear disparity of forces regarding either men or tanks, at least on paper. In terms of aircraft, the situation was much less balanced. It would even be ironical to say that the 450 aircraft of the newly created 8th Army were no match for the 1,200 in Luftflotte 4. So that's for the global figures. Of course, in the early stages of the battle, not all those forces were engaged yet into intense fighting. About 1/3 of the total German forces and about half of the Soviets were taking part in the first significant clashes in the Don Band at the end of July. 1 month later, on August 23rd, as the campaign was already developing between the Don and Volga rivers. Most of the troops on both sides were committed to the fighting. Regarding tanks, however, this wasn't so. They were committed much more earlier. In fact, all the armored units available on both sides were soon engaged into the intense fighting that began on July 23rd and which was to last about 10 days, so that by the beginning of August, while many German armored units ended up depleted, most of the Soviet ones were destroyed. So that the battle for Stalingrad began with a major tank fight that not only left durable scars, but also shaped the German appreciation of Soviet capacities for mounting such operations. The poorly prepared Soviet operations in July and August comforted the German assumptions that no major threat was to expect on the Don River, and that they could concentrate on capturing the Volga and Stalingrad. A decisively wrong assessment, as it was to prove a few months later in November. So thumbs up, TIK. Keep up the good work. You can count on Staldata to support you and to provide whatever help it can to produce the most interesting Stalingrad videos. So don't forget to subscribe and see you later on TIK's channel and on Staldata.